I'm glad you give me this opportunity. I'm very partial to Canada, and I think their socialized medicine system I think they're wise to have it. And I think they're wise to pay their pharmaceutical prices instead of ours. And I think it's wonderful that we've gotten along with Canada so well all these years. And no, I think you should be quite pleased with Canada. I don't think it helped you to have two different languages spoken. That was an unfortunate accident. But I basically like Canada, and I think in some ways you do better than we do.
Good morning, Mr.
Jerry points out that we have customers in Canada. He's encouraging me. Yes, go ahead.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. R.J. Manuelian. I'm an attorney just like yourself, following in your footsteps,
I'm
currently
an
investing.
ex-attorney.
I had a question regarding investing. With computers and artificial intelligence rapidly getting better at investing than humans, what should analysts and portfolio managers in the investment management industry do to remain competitive? Thank you.
Well, that's a very good question. I think what people in the investment management industry ought to do is prepare for tougher times ahead. I think this indexing thing is going to run and run and run, and I think that there are wretched excesses in a lot of the well-paid hedge fund and private equity businesses that will in due time result in a lot of troubles that give pain. So everywhere I see the endowment managers have the same mantra. They want fewer and better investment managers. That's not going to be good for investment managers. And the rest of the people are indexing. Now, do you want any other cheery news? The cheery news is that if you think the way we nerds think and keep at it long enough, you'll do all right. But if you go with this crowd, I think there's pain ahead.
Hi, Charlie, on your left. My name's Jonathan Bird, and I'm from Phoenix. In the past, you've recommended index funds for most people seeking wealth accumulation. And in the past, Warren Buffett has recommended using the sell-off strategy for income as opposed to chasing dividends. If we synthesize those ideas, it seems like the best course of action for investing over a lifetime is to use index funds for accumulation and the sell-off strategy for income in retirement. Would you agree with that? And if so, what benefits do you see in using that strategy? Thank you.
Well, I think the reason it's growing is that for most people it does work better. And on the other hand, there's a huge proclivity to gamble. It's very interesting to play in a game where the returns are variable. And so there's a huge lure that comes to gambling. So in China, the ordinary holding period for the individual investor is short. They love to gamble in stocks. This is really stupid. It's hard to imagine anything dumber than the way the Chinese hold stocks. And they're so good at everything else. It shows how hard it is to be rational. But I don't think investment management is going to... I think there are lots of troubles coming. There's too much wretched excess.
Charlie, my name is Parth Chaudhary. I'm an investor from India. Once again, I want to thank you so much for the time that you spend with us and give us so much of your time. I had a question regarding the Stoics. It's something I've read after you've started. You actually mentioned it. There's a great, anybody who's read your life, you're a testament to the idea that to not be a victim, but to be a survivor. And it's an attitude that has helped me in my short life so far. Could you perhaps expand on that idea, how it's helped you, and how that is perhaps one of the greatest ways to live your life out, regardless of what happens to you?
Well, of course, feeling like it's rather interesting to make change. Some people are victimized by other people. And if it weren't for the indignation that causes, we wouldn't have reforms that we need. But that truth is mixed with another. It's very counterproductive for an individual to feel like a victim, even if he is. Best attitude is just to be cheerful about everything and keep plugging along. And therefore, I don't like politicians that get ahead by trying to make everybody else feel like a victim. And they make my flesh crawl. And I just don't believe in it. Of course, who wants to be a victim instead of a survivor? Of course we want. But feeling like a victim, you can recognize your position is bad and try and improve it. That's okay. But to have a deep feeling of victimhood and it's all somebody else's fault is a very counterproductive way to think. People don't even like being around it. It's really stupid. And yet our politicians build on it and try and make their careers work by doing something that's very bad for all the people they're talking to. And they think they're doing the world's work. You know, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Hi, Mr. Munger.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to be here with you. My name is Paul Smith from Boulder, Colorado. The Daily Journal and Berkshire own a lot of the very large banks. I suspect many people in this room do. I know I do. Kind of tailgating you and Mr. Buffett. My question is concerning some of the fintech technologies coming up. Your position on crypto is very clear, but some of the other fintech technologies, my question is, do you see them as being a threat to the long-term profitability of those large banks?
Well, I don't know much about crypto technologies except to avoid them. So, and by the way, I have a lot of things. I have what I call the too hard pile. And if you're fit in my too hard pile, I throw you into my too hard pile and don't think about them. Now, every once in a while, I take something on or drift into something really difficult. And then I continue doing it just because I'm perverse. The Daily Journal is basically a ridiculous enterprise. It's really difficult. And I'm enormously rich, and I'm 96 years old. Yet I care terribly how it works out. A little insane. I don't wonder why would you come here and talk to a nutcase like me? But no, I hate things like Bitcoin. I mean, I hate things that are intrinsically antisocial. Of course, we need real currencies. And one of the interesting things about the current condition is that we Americans have created the reserve, by accident, have created the reserve currency of the world. And the world needs a reserve currency. And I don't sense any great sense of trusteeship among my fellow Americans for behaving very well in our responsibilities to the rest of the world with our own currency. Our attitude is we'll do what pleases us. That's not my view. I think once you get a big responsibility to other people that are depending on you, you ought to think about them too.
Mr. Munger, we have record budget deficits, record unemployment, and record expansion of the balance sheet. Why do you think we don't have inflation? And secondly, could you recommend some good books you've read the last year?
Well, regarding inflation, you know, the economists of the world thought they knew a lot more than they did. What has happened is weird, that in response to the Great Recession, all the nations of the world have printed money like crazy and have bought all kinds of investment assets. And they've done things that nobody in the economics profession would have recommended on this scale, even 5 or so years ago. And yet the inflation has been very low. I think we all have a lot to be modest about when we talk about economics. Lyndon Johnson said that giving a talk on economics was a lot pissing down your leg. He says it feels hot to you, but it doesn't influence anybody else very much. And I'm afraid I can't do much better than Lyndon Johnson could.
Books? Any books you recommend?
Oh, books. Oh, people send me books more than I can read. And I've gotten so I skim a lot of them very rapidly. And I'm not sure I'm the right one anymore to do. Books are so important to me all my life that I find that I used to read fewer books and read them better than I do now. And of course, I don't see very well. So maybe you should talk to some younger man about your books.
Hi, Charlie. My name is Yang Lee. I'm an investor from New York. Thank you so much for this great platform to learn from you and sharing your wisdom. My question is about your outlook for global market and economy, especially given the slowdown in global economy driven by Chinese economy and also the rising geopolitical risk. So what's your take on market and economy going forward? Thank you.
Well, I am mildly optimistic about China for a variety of reasons. Nobody has ever taken a big nation ahead as fast as China has come ahead. And I think they've done a lot right. So I'm a big admirer of what's happened there. If you stop to think about it, they were in a Malthusian trap, and they prevented 500,000 babies from being born. And they did it by methods that we wouldn't like in the United States. But I think they were doing the world a favor, and I think that what they did was admirable. So basically, I don't have this hostility toward China. I really admire what the Chinese people have achieved, and I think, considering that they started as communists, their leaders are pretty good. And it's amazing. Imagine a communist country creating this enormous period of growth and prosperity and lifting 800 million people out of poverty. And so I like what's happening in China, and I think the United States ought to get along with China. And China ought to get along with the United States. And regarding the global situation, it's so peculiar to have negative interest rates. And another thing I greatly admire is, and this will strike you as really peculiar, there's one modern nation which has had like 25 years of stasis. How can anybody admire 25 years of stasis? Well, I think the Japanese have handled 25 years of stasis with magnificent skill and philosophy. Japan is not going to hell. They don't like 25 years of stasis, but they take it like men, and they aren't bitching and wailing, and they don't act like victims. And so I really admire the way the Japanese have handled their adversity. And I don't think the adversity came from a lot of mistakes. I think the adversity to Japan, they were an export powerhouse, and up came China and Korea. Of course they had some troubles. We'd all have troubles if we had way tougher competition. And so I think that's I don't think Japan's stasis was Japan's fault. I think it just happened. And I think they bear up in it magnificently well in order to be greatly admired. And of course, they got into this defect-free manufacturing ethos in a big way and led the world in it. So I think the United States has a lot to learn from Asians. Think of how everything's clean in Japan. You don't see any homeless sleeping defecating in the street either. Oh, I think there's a lot to be said for Japan.
Charlie, thank you very much for having us here today and sharing your wisdom and your beliefs. I was hoping that you might share with us some examples of how you've used disconfirming evidence to change some of your important determinedly held beliefs.
Well, of course, being able to recognize when you're wrong is a godsend. If you take a good bit of the Munger fortune came from liquidating things we originally purchased because we were wrong. Of course, you have to learn to change your mind when you're wrong. And I actually work at trying to discard beliefs. And most people just try and cherish whatever idiotic notion they already have because they think if it's their notion, it must be good. And I think, of course, you want to be re-examining what you previously thought, particularly when disconfirming evidence comes through. And there's hardly anything more important than being rational and objective. Just think of all the dumb things you can do in life. Think of the brilliant people who are just utterly brilliant, who do some of the dumbest things. You won't have any trouble thinking of examples. In fact, most of us can think of our own action in the last year or two, and we can all pull up an example or two. It's hard to be rational.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. Thank you so much for teaching us. I also want to thank Mr. Kaufman. Here comes my question. I recently watched a documentary that introduced the economic masters Keynes and Hayek. I would like to know your comments on both of them and which economic theory you would prefer. And to take a step further, if applied to personal goal setting, which model would you advise us to follow between planning and flexibility? Thank you very much.
Well, Keynes, of course, was a very interesting man, and he probably had more influence on the economics profession than anybody, maybe excepting Adam Smith. And of course, I lived in the Great Depression, and his ideas were exactly right for fixing the Great Depression. And what happened was we got out of it finally because accidental Keynesianism came in, courtesy of Adolf Hitler in World War II. And so I don't see how you could study economics without Keynes. Hayek is more complicated, and I don't think I'm the world's best understander of Hayek. I've read him, and I tend to rather admire him, but I'm not sure I totally agree with him. It's too tough for me. Therefore, I quit Clement to you.
Hi, Mr. Munger.
Yeah.
Over this side? My name is Glenn Tung. Thank you for this wonderful meeting and especially for serving food this year. I want to ask you about Tesla. The company has a market capitalization of about $140 billion. It traded last week about $200 billion in stock and traded about $500 billion in options. And the stock moved about 20% a day. Meanwhile, Mr. Musk seems thrilled to stoke this volatility. I wanted to know what your thoughts are on this situation, and particularly what your thoughts are on Mr. Musk's behavior.
My thoughts are two. I would never buy it, and I would never sell short. I have a third comment. There was a man found in Los Angeles for years named Howard Amundsen. He once said something that I've taken to my heart. He said, "Never underestimate the man who overestimates himself." I think Elon Musk is peculiar, and he may overestimate himself, but he may not be wrong all the time.
Hi, Mr. Munger. My name is Joe. I'm an investor from China. I do the venture capital. And three things. First, I really thank you for you encouraging so many investors around the world. And I hope you keep your body well and do this a little longer. And then I have two questions. First is, what do you think of the value investment in next 50 or 100 years? And second question is, do you have any advice on the industrial research or the industrial investments? Thank you.
Well, I don't think I've got any wonderful comments to make about industrial investment. I do have the feeling that the world may change. And two changes that I think are possible are that I think they may extend life, average life duration by fancy tricks. And I think they may reduce cancer deaths by fancy amounts. Well, I think weird things may happen. And I do not intend to make money out of any of this if it happens to me. But I think of what's already happened in technology. Imagine the whole internet developing and whole different things, and all those old companies, all the daily newspapers dying, and total change in manufacturing processes. And there's been a lot of change, and of course it's caused a lot of loss to people who own stocks. And I do have the feeling that more that was really important has probably already happened, and it's going to happen from this point forward. How much better can it be once you have enough to eat and mate you like and a few other things? I mean, what is extra money going to do for you? So I do think that my generation had the best of all this technical change. You know, our children stopped dying. Living standards went way up. Air conditioning came. There were a million good things that have medicine greatly improved. They could replace your achy joint when it caused agony. And I don't think we're going to get as much improvement in the future because we've conquered so much already.
Mr. Munger, on your right. Earlier in the meeting, you mentioned the benefits of taking the high road, treating the customers the right way, et cetera. There's a sense, which may or may not be true, but there is a sense that in China, there's more moral flexibility in business, less respect for the rule of law, and less transparency than there is in the West. Do you share that concern?
Well, I'm naturally more comfortable in my own country with its traditions than I am in what's evolved out of Chinese communism. And of course, I admire, considering where they were, mired in this Malthusian poverty, and I also mired in some ignorance. And that leader who said, "I don't care if the cat is black or white, I want to know if it catches mice," that was one smart leader. And I think that smart leader yesteryear has other leaders now who are smart. And I think they're going to keep improving. I even think the Chinese may get over their crazy love of gambling. I once talked to a bunch of Chinese leaders. I said, I got the feng shui, and I said, "Get over it. Pure superstition."
Good morning, Charlie.
Yeah.
Hi. How are you? On your right-hand side.
All right.
And quick question. Any secret of longevity, and how many hours do you work a day? How do you stay like so current with all the information, like a lifelong learner?
Well, I don't think I deserve any credit for longevity. It just happened. I don't have any. There's no male in my family that ever lived any such age. And it's weird. Oh, I can't help you.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Hey, Charlie, good morning. It's Jason Leader, Bel Air, Texas. Thanks for your time, and also thanks for your perspective. You mentioned earlier that some mental tricks have been helpful to you. One was taking the high road. The other is being perfectly rational. What other mental tricks have been helpful to you during your life? And also you touched on excesses, and you're worried about some excesses, whether it's in venture capital, private equity, political sphere, and also, I guess, in government debt. What other excesses do you see in the system right now?
I don't think the opioid epidemic, I don't think the wide use of opioids has helped us either. There's always some miserable excess. And it's a very complicated subject. You remember how the Chinese emperor got rid of opioid addiction when something like 1 male in 8 or something like that in China was an opium addict? He didn't have to kill very many people. He just said death penalty for users, no exceptions. And away went his addiction problem. I think somebody may try some of that stuff sooner or later if things get awful enough. And it may not be the worst way to handle it. With that cheery note, I'll go to the next question.
Mr. Munger, over here on your left side.
Yeah.
I'm a father of 3 young children under the age of 14, and my question to you is, what would you recommend to teach children on how to prepare them to be successful in life?
I think the best thing any parent can do is be a good example. Preaching doesn't work worth a damn.
Yeah. There are over $10 trillion of securities around the world with a negative yield, and by the president's Twitter feed, it seems that he wants to bring negative interest rates to the United States. Are you for negative interest rates or against them?
Negative interest rates make me very nervous. However, I don't think the authorities had much choice. It's politically impossible to do big stimulus rapidly, and the only weapon they had in a crisis was to print money and change interest rates. And I think it was probably the right thing to be done. Of course it makes me nervous. And I think, having worked once, people will overdo it. I think that's the nature of governments and people. And of course that makes me nervous. I don't know what to do about this.
Hi, Charlie. I'm in the back of the room on your right. I'm Cameron Hamidi. My question is about the effects of low interest rates on insurance. Lower returns on float may be causing a tighter supply of insurance. For example, there used to be 3 main underwriters insuring all the taxi cabs in Southern California. Now it is heading towards just 1 underwriter who will have a monopoly on all commercial taxi insurance in Southern California. You have access to CEOs of Geico and Wesco and a Rolodex that we can only dream of. So do you see 10 years of low interest rates posing a systemic risk to the supply of insurance?
I am made uncomfortable with the idea of extremely low interest rates or negative interest rates, even more extreme, lasting a long time. I don't think anybody knows how those will work. So, if you are a little uneasy, welcome to the club. I think it's dangerous and peculiar. But I think we had to do what we did. In other words, I don't have any good solution for you. I think you're right to be worried about it.
Charlie, it's okay to talk. I'm Steve Hausman. I've been in the broker business since 1966. I came to your meeting back in the 80s. I think we had 25 or 30 people at your annual meeting. The question I have, with the deficit so high, with interest rates, is interest rates in more of a bubble situation? And I remember back in the 70s, we had the Nifty 50. Is our technology stocks in the same criteria as it is now? It looks like there's 10, 15 stocks everybody's investing. The value situation has been down for the last 4 or 5 years. I was also looking at a couple of stocks that you own, Kraft Foods, with your 26% in the company. How come does it make sense for your company, for Berkshire Hathaway, to buy out Kraft Food completely and take advantage of the low price?
Well, I don't think I can comment about what Berkshire Hathaway might do next at what price. But Nifty 50 is an interesting question. At the height of the Nifty 50 craziness, which was created by the Morgan Bank of all places, had a home sewing company who was selling for 50 times earnings. Home sewing. Great God. We are not that crazy yet. So I think that a lot of what's happened is not crazy. I think these companies are very valuable. Well, they may be selling at too high prices, but home sewing was sure to fail. I don't think our leading tech companies are at all sure to fail. Well, I think it's not nearly, the current situation is not nearly as crazy as what Nifty 50 was. Absolute dementia.
So, hi, Mr. Munger. My name is Nicholas Ganchev. I'm currently pursuing my MBA at USC Marshall. Many of my classmates are considering careers in private equity and venture capital. You yourself mentioned that some of your family are having careers in private equity. You also mentioned that you see a lot of excess in that sphere. What advice do you give to your family that is starting careers in private equity, and what advice would you give to young people as a whole starting careers in those sectors? Thank you.
My family is not very interested in what I think about their career choices. And I respect their disinterest. But I do think we've got way too much wretched excess. Anytime you're inventing new names to sort of mislead people, like adjusted EBITDA, but think of the basic intellectual dishonesty that comes when you start talking about adjusted EBITDA. You're almost announcing you're a flake. And yet our respectable people talk that way and charge fees for talking that way. It's ridiculous. And so I don't like the wretched excess. I don't like all these transactions where one private equity group sells to another and the guys who really own it are just sort of raising the fees higher and higher for owning the same in the intellectual mix. There's a lot that's financed by its nature. The temptations are too great and it goes to wretched excess. Of course, I don't like it. I don't think it's good for the country. I would argue that the wretched excess that led to the Great Depression, which led to the rise of Hitler, I think we pay a big price eventually for wretched excess and stupidity and greed and so forth. I'm all for staying in control. In other words, I'm all for behaving a lot more like Confucius.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. Thank you for having us. It's a privilege to be here. My name is Alan Chung. I'm from San Francisco. My friend Tony Huang wanted to be here and ask this question himself, but he's currently stuck in China, so he's asked me to ask this on his behalf. Mr. Munger, it is well known that you are an avid and voracious reader. Tony wanted to ask, do you ever reread books that you've already read before? And if so, which books do you reread?
Yeah, I do. Let me give you an example of something I want to reread that I haven't reread yet. The other day I was musing over the current situation, and it popped into my head that I had read a poem about 80 years ago by George Sand, and George Sand was a female writer, but female writers, to get ahead in those days, sometimes used men's names. George Sand wrote a poem, and it was an ode to the goddess of poverty. She said, "Hail to the goddess of poverty, a wonderful goddess of poverty. She tills the fields, she mines the mines," and so on. And if I remember right, toward the end, the goddess of poverty said, "If you try and banish me, you'll live to want me back." I kind of agreed with this poem, and I'd like to see it again. I don't know how to punch notes on the internet and get George Sand's poem to me, so if somebody will send me her poem, I'll very much like it. But I'm telling you this because it's an antidote to our politicians who want to tell us they're going to abolish all poverty. It's a stupid idea. You know, it's like saying we'll all be riches in a modern civilization are a relative thing. It's status where we want. It isn't that we need more beans. And the trouble with reaching for status is that the bottom 90% are always going to contain exactly 99% of the people, no matter how hard we work or how much we succeed. And we actually need some tough incentives in a civilization to make it work. In other words, George Sand was right. The goddess of poverty is not all bad. She's partly good. And of course, I like thoughts that I have that are different from everybody else. And I think that a billionaire who talks about the glories of the goddess of poverty is making a contribution. But only a bunch of nerds like you will appreciate it.
Mr. Munger?
Yeah.
In here in the back. Thank you once again for taking our questions today. Really appreciate it. Just wanted to ask you a quick question about the fact that you were an early proponent of electric vehicles, specifically your investment in BYD. I wonder if, from your perspective today, other technologies like hydrogen fuel cells or others that may come to mind are equally important in terms of their emerging capabilities and what sort of impact they may have.
Well, I think electric vehicles will be more popular than hydrogen fuel cells. Getting the sun's energy transferred into electricity and electricity into the vehicles is basically a good idea for the long pole. And I think all the technology is going to work. And some of it's actually improving. We may get a lithium battery that's actually quite safe and more energetic than those we have now. Well, I think that's all to the good. In fact, here in California, when I came to California, we had a petroleum club. We had wildcatters. We had a big oil industry. It was a little like Texas. I don't think we found any new oil to speak of in California in decades. I think it's dangerous to rely on hydrocarbons for energy. Of course, we've got to take more of it directly from the sun. I think that Texas will eventually get to be like California.
Mr. Munger, good morning. I'm Sergio from Dominican Republic, and my question is, do you think it's necessary for America to recover a positive trade balance to keep its prosperity in the next century?
The answer is no.
Dear Charlie, my name is Liang Hong. I visit this church today from Tokyo, Japan, where I work for one of your investees. To borrow words from another blind philosopher, John Milton, Berkshire, Costco, and Daily Journal, please be long choosing and beginning late. This question is for my 5 children who may be watching later. How do you nudge your kids and grandkids to hold on to their shares for as long as possible?
I don't think I'm a good model for you. My children seem to do pretty much what they please. And I find I'm happier if I just do the best I can by my children and take the results as they fall. I wouldn't sweat too much about whether your children hold the stock or not.
Good morning, Mr. Munger. Right here. I'm Ariman. I'm a student at USC, and I just had a quick question. I'm 18 right now. I'm in college, and sometimes I lose interest in what I do. And you're 96, and you're so passionate about what you do. So what keeps you going? Like, how do you still have the motivation? Thank you.
Well, maybe I've been lucky. I like what I do. I have wonderful partners and friends. I have a nice family. My problems are interesting to me. I have been a very fortunate man, and I don't know how to make everybody else lucky. Well, I could have had a different hand and been some miserable alcoholic throwing up in the gutter. I don't think I deserve any great credit for having stumbled into a reasonable amount of publicity. I do think that trying to be rational helped. That's the only thing you've got if you're a fellow nerd. There's no point in you're not going to be a sex object. You may have to rely on your rationality.
Hey, Charlie. My name is Brian Lax. I'm from Los Angeles. There's a lot of talk these days about the climate and the environment and funds divesting fossil fuels and countries trying to figure out how to generate electricity without polluting the environment. Could you give us your thoughts on nuclear power? I know Bill Gates has been a pretty vocal supporter of it. And I read that Warren used to invest in uranium back in the 50s, and he more recently helped fund a